You're listening to
and such a short amount of time to do it in.
a Mamamia podcast.
So just to give you some context, have you watched There's No I in Threesome?
I haven't. I know of it.
Yeah.
I do know of it, but
So
I haven't
it's
seen
a
it.
Nadia Bokody used to be married, but for a bunch of reasons, it didn't really suit her. And one of those reasons was sex. From Mamamia, I'm Mia Friedman, and you're listening to No Filter, an interview podcast with people who tell their stories very candidly and aren't afraid to be vulnerable. Opening up your relationship so that you can have sex with other people is really risky. And I know this because earlier this week I spoke to filmmaker Ollie Lucks about his open relationship and the documentary he made about it called There's No I in Threesome. Ollie and his fiancée Zoe wrote what they called a monogamish manifesto before they started sleeping with other people, and it worked really well for them until it didn't. You can listen to that episode by scrolling back in this feed, and I highly recommend you do. But I really wanted to also talk to someone, a woman preferably, whose open relationship was working. Someone who was navigating the jealousy and the logistics and all of the feelings that are involved when you and the person that you love have agreed, in Nadia's case, to both have sex with other women.
Poly means many and the word amor means love. So polyamorous is more for people that have many actual romantic relationships. For me, it was more about the sexual variety and the sexual novelty. And that tends to be what I hear from women.
So how's it going? Here is my eye-opening conversation with Nadia. Nadia, what's your current relationship status? How would you describe it?
I describe my relationship as monogamish, which is a term that was actually technically coined by Dan Savage, who is quite a popular sex columnist over in the States. And he has been with his husband, I think, for like over 15 years. And the first 4 years of their relationship were just standard monogamous relationship. And then they decided to open up the relationship. So monogamish is, you're largely monogamous, but you can on occasion go and have sex with people that aren't your main partner.
How long have you and your partner been together?
4 years.
How old are you?
I am 37 this year. Well, I should be saying 36 because I've still got a few months left of that. I shouldn't be aging myself up.
How would you describe your sort of relationship history roughly?
I would say that I've done all of the things that are traditionally thrust upon women. I was married for 7 years. You know, I was in my early 20s. I literally fell in love with the boy next door, was literally my next door neighbor, like quite literally. We were really in love, and so it just seemed like the next logical thing is, okay, now we get married. And then I realized a few years in, like, I'm not happy. I don't like this. It wasn't the fault of my husband. He did nothing wrong. I still have nothing but love for him, but I was just so miserable in that construct, I guess. I just realized it wasn't for me, and I felt that there was something fundamentally wrong with me because I had been taught as a woman growing up, this is the ultimate goal of a woman, is to find a man, and that's how we basically make ourselves, you know, have worth, basically, is that we've attached ourselves to a man for life, and that should be the main goal in life. And so if I couldn't do that, then what did that say about me as a woman, that I couldn't be a wife? You know, when I first said the marriage didn't work, people are like, well, maybe you just need to find the right man. But for me, it was never about that, because my husband was amazing. We were best friends. We still have a good relationship. It was about the fact that I didn't want to be married. I didn't want to be monogamous.
What didn't you like about it? Was it the monogamy? Was it the not having sex with other people that you didn't like?
It was the monogamy, and a lot of this potentially goes to being young, but I think a lot of women listening will relate to this. It was the losing my identity to the relationship, of being seen as someone's other half instead of being seen as a person in my own right, of all the things that just merged in our two lives so that I didn't feel that I had my own separate life anymore. And it wasn't because my husband ever put pressure on me or made me feel I couldn't do things on my own. It was the societal pressures, and it was the fact of not even having the kind of sex that I wanted to be having. And to be honest, I don't know what was the sex I was wanting to having at the time, because I was in my 20s. All I knew is I wasn't really enjoying it. Again, I was never being pressured to have sex, nothing like that. The sex was loving, but it just was, I didn't feel I could really sort of speak up for myself and explore things, because I thought, well, is that something a wife would do? You know, that's part of my role, is to please my husband. And I just feel like I really lost myself into that role of trying to please another person and to look like what I thought a wife was supposed to look like. And it just made me miserable.
Was he the first guy you slept with?
No, I'd had boyfriends before that. So I definitely had serious relationships before that, but he was probably the first guy that I really felt like I really fell truly madly in love with. And so that just seemed like the logical thing then to do was, okay, now we get married, that's the next step.
Glennon Doyle talks about being underwhelmed and overwhelmed in her marriage at the same time before she ended it. That idea of, is this all there is? Is that a little bit how you felt?
Absolutely. And what's so interesting about that is, as a sex columnist, a lot of women read my column, and I get at least one DM a day, if not more, from a woman saying, I'm married and I'm in my mid-30s or I'm in my late 30s and I'm just starting to wonder, is this all there is? And I think a lot of women, we just get shoved in the same way that society shoves us into motherhood. Some women thrive in motherhood and really enjoy it. And some women, while they may really love and adore their children, I've spoken to women who say, if I had to go back and do it again, I don't know that I would have chosen to be a mother, because I felt that it was just thrust upon me that this is the thing that you will enjoy if you're a woman. So I think it's more the fact that we don't really get given choices. We're starting to have these conversations more now, which is great. But so many of the women I talk to will say, yeah, I felt very underwhelmed and kind of trapped because everyone told me this is what would be the goal of my life. And now I'm here and I'm sexually bored. I'm lonely. I'm not enjoying this arrangement.
This sounds sort of punitive, but did you try to fix it in the marriage? Did you try to say, look, I'm underwhelmed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm bored, I'm feeling constrained. Could we try this? Did that come into the equation for you?
It did, absolutely. The problem is, we got therapy and I went to therapy on my own. But for me, like some of the scenarios that I brought up to my husband, like what if you had sex with someone else? What if we maybe had a threesome? These different ideas. In his mindset, he's a very traditional guy. And so he was like, no, all of those things classify as cheating to me. I'm like, what if it was me with another woman? Would you find that less confronting? He was like, no, that's cheating to me. I also speak to a lot of women who say they've had this same situation. They're like, oh, well, I brought it up to my husband and he sees all those things as cheating and so he doesn't want to do it. And the problem is, because there's so much shame around sex, when we are sort of vetting someone in those dating stages, we have conversations with them about like, okay, what are your values around raising kids and religion and career and finances and all of those things when we're getting serious with someone. But for some bizarre reason, we never talk about sex. And so I waited until I was, 6 years into my marriage to find out if my husband and I actually had that sexual compatibility. And surprise, surprise, we didn't. And unfortunately, a lot of people end up in that situation. So the thing that I learned from the situation, and the best advice I can give to people going into new relationships, is it's uncomfortable, but have that discussion about sexual compatibility, because the worst thing that can happen is you end up 5, 10, 20 years into a relationship and realize that, wait a minute, I want to do all of these maybe more unconventional, more kinky things or whatever, and my partner's not open to doing any of those things. My partner's super vanilla. It's the same thing as if one partner really wants kids and the other partner has no interest in having kids. How are you going to make that work? It's such a fundamental thing, but we don't talk about it.
Something you have talked about is you say that it's a myth that women, as they get older, lose their libido, or women in long-term relationships lose their libido. Why is it a myth, do you think?
I mean, it's a complete myth. We are just totally sold this lie that women aren't really interested in sex, that sex is something we exchange with men for commitment, for fidelity, and that we really just crave monogamy. And it's really men who want sex and who crave a lot of sexual variety. But studies show women consume more porn than men. Studies show...
Really?
Absolutely. We spend more time watching porn, consuming it, than men do. We're the largest consumers of sex toys. And studies show as well that men consistently underestimate how much sex their female partners want. We assume women don't want sex because what we tend to see is women go into these monogamous relationships and you'll hear the husband complaining like, oh, I can never get her to have sex with me. Like, it's my birthday, maybe I'm getting laid tonight. And women will make little jokes about it as well. And then women will also convince themselves, well, yeah, I really don't want sex with my husband, so I guess that means I don't have a libido, right? Wrong, because most of the women I speak to, those same women still masturbate. They still do a double take when they see a hot guy on the street. many of those women are engaging in sexual affairs. You know, studies show that women are catching up now to men in terms of infidelity rates. Female infidelity has risen by something like 40% in the past few years. This is also based off, you know, surveys where they're relying on people being honest. So I would say infidelity rates are even higher than what we think they are. But they estimate it's around like 20% of women that are currently cheating on their partners.
Right.
So it's not that women don't want sex, it's that we get bored sexually much faster than men, and because society has told us we don't like sex and we're apparently not allowed to like sex, otherwise that makes us a slut, then we just naturally assume when we stop wanting sex in a relationship that just means our libido has gone away. But it's not gone away. It's not being stimulated by the situation that we're in.
So after your marriage ended, you had various long-term relationships, but then did you discuss what you needed at the beginning of those relationships? Were they monogamish, these new relationships?
So after I came out of my marriage, I had a lot of casual sex. It's something I've talked about and written about a lot, about the importance of that period in my life, because I call it kind of a bit playfully my hoe phase, just because it was my time to really explore my sexuality and what I wanted, being with both men and women, and just asking for what I wanted sexually as well, because I think women, again, we're not really taught to speak up in the bedroom. And I think because I was having sex with total strangers that I knew was going to be a one-night stand, I was never going to see these people again, I didn't really care. I felt that I could actually just say, hey, could we actually just try this, or could you stop doing that, or whatever it was. And so I had that phase, and that really helped massively with my confidence and realizing that it was okay to ask for what I wanted, and that I felt more powerful than ever to ask for what I wanted, not just in the bedroom, but at work, in my relationships, in my friendships, everywhere. And so when I eventually did settle into a long-term relationship with my current partner, I discussed very early on in the dating phase that monogamy was not something I was interested in long-term. I said, that's what I want right now. Like, I'm not interested in seeing other people except for you. But at some point, I will want to be a bit more fluid with this arrangement.
And what was his reaction?
He's a super open-minded guy, and also he's younger than me, so I think that helps. Yeah, he was totally cool with it. I mean, like when we met, I was like, I'm a sex columnist. I write about like people that I've had sex with, so my sex life is on the internet.
That's daunting straight out of the gate.
So no, he didn't mind at all. I've always seen that sex and love are two completely different things, and I think he's able to conceptualize that as well. I think a lot of people are able to conceptualize that. It's that conditioning we've been taught that, well, if you love someone, you will never have eyes for anyone else except for that person. Well, that's not true. You can still get sexually aroused by someone else. You can choose whether or not you act on that sexual arousal. But just because we love someone doesn't mean that we don't want sex with other people and that we can't enjoy having sex with other people. And that's why I personally think this whole idea of people treating infidelity as if it's the worst possible thing and cancelling out a 20-year marriage because one partner screwed up and got drunk one night and they were sexually frustrated and they screwed someone else they met at a bar. It's such a harsh black and white way to look at relationships. I'm not here to condone fidelity. I'm sure some people will listen and say that's what I'm doing. I always get that feedback whenever I talk about this. I'm not condoning infidelity at all. What I'm saying is we hold our partners to such an extremely high standard that it makes it almost impossible for them to succeed. We say that our partner has to be our everything. You know, like Esther Perel talks about it in her super viral TED talk that she's done about infidelity. It talks about the fact that we used to have a village of people to be all those things to us, to be our therapist, our friend, our co-worker, our business partner. Now our husband is our business partner, our lover, our best friend. They are all these things, and it puts a lot of extra strain on the relationship. And it's not shocking that sometimes that might falter. And I think if you get through 20 years and you both screwed up a couple of times sexually, I think you've done well. I don't think you've done badly at all.
You said that during your casual sex years, you hooked up with men and women. What's the difference between a casual hookup with a man and a casual hookup with a woman? Just generally speaking.
It's very different.
How is it different?
Oh,
so
my
take
God.
me from I don't know if this was in swiping left and right times, but from the beginning, how is it different?
connecting with a woman on a dating app, it feels a lot less predatory. A lot of men on dating apps it feels quite predatory sometimes. They'll be very sleazy and sexual. It's not like that when you're talking with women. Women really connect with each other and the conversation feels a lot easier and just a lot less sort of pressured. And sexually, it's like a whole thing. Like, women take a lot more time because we need a lot more time when we're having partnered sex, to get to orgasm. And also, I think when it's two women, the focus is actually really not on orgasm. It's very goal orientated when you're having P&V or penis in vagina sex because that's what we've been taught. It's all about penetration and orgasm. And so we've all slept with a guy who's in and out and, asks if you came and you're like, yeah, I came to the wrong house. Like, let me just get my false eyelashes and get the hell out of here. Okay. Women are more, you're dealing with someone who has the same anatomy with you, so they get it. And women are much more focused on foreplay and kissing and oral sex and all of those sorts of things. So I think having sex with another woman is just, if anything, it can be probably a bit exhausting, physically exhausting, because it goes on for so long.
Yeah, when does it end?
Honestly, it can never end. It can go on for hours. Like, I've had sex with women where it's gone on for like 4 hours.
Oh, wow. Do you get chafing? That sounds exhausting.
You need like Gatorade
snacks?
breaks. Yeah, you need snack breaks for that.
Need a tea. It's somewhere in there. You're listening to No Filter with Nadia Bokody. So when you were with your current partner, you said, monogamy is not my jam. I want this to be an open thing. Did you set down some parameters between the two of you?
Absolutely. And I think it's foolish to think that you're just going to open up your relationship and start exploring and seeing what works without having set down any ground rules, because obviously, it's loaded. People's feelings are involved. Also, you have to think about safety, about your own private space as well. Things like, do you really want your partner bringing someone else into the home? Things like that. Those are all things that need to be discussed. So, we agreed not bringing anyone back to the house, that it was...
Because you live together.
At the time we did. We live separately now. And that it would be purely sexual, and it would be something that would be a continued thing. It would be like a one-off thing, and that it wouldn't be with anyone we had a prior connection with. So it wouldn't be just with like a work colleague or a friend or someone where...
Or an ex.
Exactly. Someone where there would be more of an emotional connection. And that's why I don't identify as polyamorous. Polyamorous is, poly means many, and the word amor means love. So polyamorous is more for people that have many actual romantic relationships. They might classify one of those as their primary relationship, or they might have like poly people can have something called a triad, where there's like 3 people in the relationship and they all have equal like importance, or that structure can change. For me, it was more about the sexual variety and the sexual novelty. And that tends to be what I hear from women. When women say to me, like, I really want to open my marriage, the main thing they say is, I love my husband, he's my best friend, I'm really happy with him, but I'm just so bored of the sex, or we've just stopped having sex.
And what were the rules for your partner? Same as for you?
Yes. Yeah. We had the exact same rules, which were just, and we talked about, will we ask each other before we do it? Like, I have a girlfriend who was in an open relationship for a long time, and she used to text her partner. She was out at a bar and she met a cute guy and say, I've met someone, I want to go home with him. Would you be cool with it? And then he would essentially determine whether or not she'd end up going home with him. And they would do that both ways.
And what would he base that decision on?
Well, I guess just whether or not he felt comfortable with it at the time. She said that, 99% of the time he would say yes. And she said if he had asked her, even if she felt a bit uncomfortable, she would realise that that was something she had to just push through. I think the other thing is we get trained to think that if we feel jealousy, then that's like a really bad thing, and that's a sign that maybe, we shouldn't do it. But jealousy is just a normal emotion. It doesn't mean we have to act on it. Just because you feel a twinge of jealousy that your partner is sleeping with someone else doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be like the worst thing because they sleep with someone else. I mean, it's hard to really know how you're fully going to feel about it until you've actually done it. It's a risk, We decided on more of a don't ask, don't tell kind of policy. Like, if I ask you if you've hooked up with anyone, you will be honest and tell me, but otherwise I won't ask about it. So that was kind of how we decided on it.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is it easier not knowing, or do you feel like you've got more control if you know every detail?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for me, I almost find it a turn on to no, because I feel like it reminds me that my partner is still a sexual being and that he's still desired by other women. And particularly when you're cohabiting with someone, you just start to lose that because you see them as, you know, your domestic partner. You almost start seeing them in like a roommate kind of sense. And that's something that I've talked about before, is the fact that particularly for women, you know, there's a lot of research. There is longitudinal studies done over like 7 years. They've done these studies around the world that just unequivocally prove that the fastest way to kill a woman's sexual desire for a man is for that woman to cohabit with him, and then on top of that to cohabit with him and have kids. So something that we have decided to do is we are now living separately.
How long did you live together for?
We only lived together for probably about 1.5 years.
And what did that do?
For me, very much exactly that. I started to only be able to see my partner as a roommate, and I realized we were just bickering over the silliest things that wouldn't normally impact me. And I found it very difficult to separate looking at him in an erotic sense and looking at him in a domestic sense. And look, some people are better at that. I've got heaps of girlfriends who are happily married, live with their husbands and have amazing sex lives. This is not to say that this is the arrangement that everyone needs. I think the reason it's good to talk about this stuff is because it's good for people to know that just because one model of relationship isn't working for you doesn't make your relationship a failure, and it doesn't make you a failure at love. It just means that something else maybe works better for you.
So how often does it happen now? And are you only allowed to have sex with other women, or you can also have sex with other men? Like, what parameters did you settle on?
So I can have sex with other women or other men. I only have sex with women at the moment.
Why is that?
That's just my personal choice. I just feel more drawn to women, I guess. I identify as bisexual. I've always been attracted to women. But I think, you know, a lot of like, I guess, internalized homophobia, it took me a long time to like fully be comfortable being intimate with women. Even though I was intimate with women when I was younger, it was something that was like a bit of a dirty secret for me and that I didn't talk to people a lot about. And so being able to be a bit more free in it now has been quite liberating. And so that's sort of what I'm focused on. In terms of how often it happens, like not super often. Like it's more of an opportunistic thing. It's not something like we're going out constantly looking for. I mean, it's hard to say, like maybe like once every couple of months.
Do you just feel the urge, or is it about, I just connected with someone that I met?
I mean, it can be a bit of both. Like it might just be like, yeah, I just feel the urge to have that bit of novelty, or I've just connected with this person who I'm super attracted to and I want to go further with that person.
And do you also, and this is very personal, but the whole thing's very personal, so I think we've
we crossed that line long ago.
I think we crossed that line. Do you have threesomes with your partner and other women or other men, or it's more something that you like to do separately?
And that's actually a great question, because I think that's how a lot of people view open relationships. And I think the thing is, you do what works best for you. For me, people are always shocked by this because I write about sex and I'm very sex positive and very sexually open, but I'm actually just super vanilla, actually quite boringly vanilla. So I personally just couldn't do a threesome. I feel like it's too much logistics, too many like body parts to navigate. One set is enough for me. So it's very much something we do.
There's a lot of options, really, aren't there? The threesome.
To me, actually, I feel like there's maybe a little bit more of an element of jealousy involved in that, because I'm actually watching my partner be with someone else as opposed to knowing he was with someone else. And if I want, I can ask for specific details about that encounter, but I'm not watching it happen in real time. And also I think just the selfishness in me, I'd be like, well, I'd need to kind of be like the star of it, you know? I'd need all of the sexual attention on me.
Yeah, totally. Do you ever get curious about the other women or men that your partner sleeps with and go and sort of stalk them on social just to see what they're like?
It's so weird because I am quite a needy and quite clingy person. I can be in relationships. But weirdly, no. I think it's like I more enjoy the fun and the fantasy of it, of him just telling me about it if I ask about it, if I decide I want to ask about it. I guess I don't feel that pull because I'm not looking at it as in this is another woman that he might have feelings for. If that was what I thought, that might start leading me more down that path where I would be maybe doing sort of some investigating or whatever. Because we're so open, like if there's anything that I should really know, he's going to tell it to me anyway. I don't need to go and try to find out something about this woman. And I think that's what I really love about our relationship because, you know, my partner, he knows a couple of guys actually who are cheating on their wives. You know, one of them's got a pregnant partner. And it's just really sad because these men clearly don't want to be in their marriages. And rather than being honest with their wives about it and saying, do we divorce? Do we discuss another arrangement? You know, how do we make this work? They've decided to spend late nights out drinking away their sorrows until they're drunk enough that they feel less bad about the fact that they're on an escort website looking for an escort or hooking up with some girl at the pub or something. And I think, like, I don't ever have to worry about that with my partner because if he wants to hook up with a girl at the pub or if he wants to go on an escort site and have sex with an escort, I'm not holding him back from doing any of that. And I think weirdly, in not holding him back from doing that and in him not holding me back from doing that, neither of us has a very strong draw to do that. Like, it's something we both have done, but it's not, I mean, I think there's this idea that if you have an open relationship, you're both out having all of this
constantly,
amazing sex
every night.
And we're at sex parties and we're having threesomes. But no, it's not the case at all. You know, it's just a very normal pedestrian relationship. But then every once in a while, we have the ability to do that. The only difference is we don't have to feel the guilt or remorse about it because we've already pre-agreed on it.
What about catching feelings?
It's funny because we spoke about this when we had the discussion about boundaries and everything in the beginning, and we said, you know, how would we navigate this? And what about the risk? What about the risk that, okay, if you go and sleep with someone else, you might fall in love with them. Maybe they're more attractive than me. Maybe they're better in bed than me. Like, what about all of those things? And as we were talking about it, you know, we realized, well, hang on, these are just the same risks that if we never open the relationship up and we were just in a super traditional monogamous relationship, my boyfriend can still go and fall in love with the woman at his work. I could still develop feelings for the girl who makes my coffee or the guy who makes my coffee or whoever it is. Being in a relationship is always a vulnerable position, you know? We are always taking a risk when we have strong feelings for someone. We're always putting ourselves out there. And there's always a chance, regardless of what your particular arrangement is, that your partner could develop feelings for someone else. That might result in your partner repressing those feelings and just being miserable in the relationship, or it might result in them acting on those feelings and having a secret ongoing affair for years. Like I say, the main difference between us is that I would hopefully already know about it because we wouldn't have anything to hide. So if we got to that point where my partner was like, you know what, I actually have started to feel something more for this person after the sex, I really want to see them again, we could have that discussion and say, all right, do we want to maybe have you explore that? Do we maybe want to go on a break? Maybe this isn't working for the two of us. That we're open to having those discussions. And I think that's
All sounds very rational.
Yeah, and it is. And I think that's
calm.
I think that's the thing about it. It's like these discussions aren't crazy and wild. They're normal discussions, but we avoid having them in relationships because of that fear
Has
and
it
that
ever
discomfort.
happened that you've caught feelings?
Not to this point, no. But could it? Absolutely. Like, I'm a very emotional person. I develop feelings very quickly for people. And I mean, I'm generalizing, of course, and I don't want to be sexist, but in general, like, women do tend to develop more of a sense of a bond and a connection with someone after we're sexually intimate with them than men do. So yes, of course, there's a chance I could.
But what about even just wanting to sleep with them more than once? Going, that sex was great. I really like you. This was fun. Let's do it again. Oh, wait, I can't. Is that the situation that you're sometimes in?
I haven't been in that situation yet. It's an interesting area because I think men see a woman being with another woman as less threatening because maybe also it's like fetishized, and queer female relationships are somehow seen as less legitimate and we're just waiting for the right dig to come along and all of that sort of stuff. So he actually doesn't care if I had sex with the same woman 20 times or if I spent the night out having dinner with that woman. He is really unconcerned with that. So I think there's been like one occasion where I've seen the same person more than once. But I mean, if I thought I was developing feelings, I feel like we've had enough difficult conversations that we could have that conversation.
Can you imagine a time that you could have two relationships going simultaneously, which is more like polyamory, right?
Yes.
Rather than, you know, having things open. Is that something you could imagine?
Not for me, because that sounds freaking exhausting.
It does, doesn't it?
I don't know how people do that. No. So for me, I think it's more the sexual side that appeals to me, of just having that novelty and that variety, and also that ability to explore my sexuality as a woman, because I feel like I've spent so much of my life just repressing my sexuality and keeping it down, not just in terms of my sexual attraction to women, but just in terms of exploring what I like sexually, because sex ed teaches girls that apparently we don't like sex. Our bodies are just sources of pain and shame, and it's all about pregnancy prevention and painful periods, and it's only boys who have wet dreams and boners and ejaculation and all those things. So I grew up believing that, sex was a performance I did for a male partner, and I've only just started learning in the past few years that sex is something I can give myself, and the monogamish arrangement just for me feels like a natural extension of that. It might not even be something that I necessarily want to do forever, but it's something that works for me now. I made a huge leap to leave a 7-year marriage. That was really humiliating for me. It was really emotionally painful. It was honestly one of the hardest times of my life.
Why was it humiliating to leave a marriage?
I felt like a failure because I had been raised to believe that
till death do us part.
It was my goal to get married, and then I had stood up in front of 100 family and friends and said till death do us part, and I'd been that typical smug bride and rubbed my relationship in other people's faces. People went out and bought the gifts on the wedding registry, and now I have to say, oh yeah, that big spectacle I made, yeah, it was all, it didn't work out. Sorry, guys. And, telling my mum as well, my mum's very...
You lasted 7 years. You gave it a pretty good crack.
We gave it a good crack.
Just finally, it's interesting how there's a sort of a trajectory of how a relationship is expected to progress as it gets more serious. So you date, then you agree to not see other people anymore, then you move in together, then you get engaged, then you get married, then you have children. You've done things in a different order. The idea of moving in together, then moving out, having things not monogamous but monogamish. How do you kind of measure the progression of your relationship, or is that just a trap that we're in, that we see somehow this constant forward momentum and ticking things off our checklist as a sign of depth of love or progress?
I wouldn't necessarily say that's a trap, because it's a really legitimate way for many people to measure the success of their relationship. I'd just say that that's one way to measure it. And I think it's about, I've had my tubes taken out. I'm sterilised. I'm never having children. It was a decision I made when I was about 12 years old, but I obviously was repeatedly told, it's a phase, you'll change your mind.
Yeah, I don't think they let 12-year-olds get their tubes tied.
I obviously wasn't trying to get my tubes tied at 12, but I knew at 12 I was never having kids, and people would always question that.
Why were you so certain?
I just remembered growing up, and my sister would play with all the little baby dolls and play, fake families, and I never liked the babies. I just want the grown-up dolls, like the Barbies.
What about your partner? Is he on the same page?
He's very much on the same page, yes. I think in many ways I've never sort of conformed to what was really expected of me, but I've felt a lot of shame around my desires not fitting with maybe what was more popular. So I think, can it be seen as a really healthy marker that your relationship is progressing, that you went from dating to marriage to having 3 kids together? Of course that can be, how can it not be?
But it's not a sign of the health of your relationship.
Yeah, because also there are people who have children who are miserable, and there are people who have children and it does nothing but enrich their lives and enrich their relationship. So I think it's more about looking at the ways that work for you and your partner. If we're living together because we got told, and that was the reason we lived together in the beginning, because we were told that, well, after been together for a certain amount of time and you really love each other, that's what you do.
Got to move in.
But we're living together and we're absolutely miserable. Is that really a marker of success? Is it really a marker of failure if you move out and we're both actually heaps happier and we're more excited to see each other for dates and things? Why does everyone have to fit within those same set of boxes? And I think I would hope that's the thing that any woman listening on would take away from this, is not that you can't want marriage and children and want traditional monogamy. There's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting any of those things, and there are many women who really enjoy that and find that very enriching. But if you want something slightly different, that's okay. I think it's just about being real with yourself about it and having the courage to have those difficult conversations with your partner about it, because that's the person you chose to be with for life, or at least for a long time if it's a de facto relationship. So you should be able to be honest with that person about what you really want.
I hope you enjoyed that. We recently did a big sex survey here at Mamamia, and the number one most popular sexual desire or fantasy among women was to have a threesome. So it's a very common thing for women to fantasize about, and in the case of Nadia and many others, actually follow through with. If you're looking for more interesting stories, why not check out the latest episode of Mamamia's Lady Startup Stories podcast. Desiree Daravi is the founder of SWF Boutique, which has over 80,000 followers on Instagram. It's very cool and fun and effortless, chic fashion. It's my kind of clothes, actually. Much like Desiree herself, she just looks like she belongs in that whole world. But when she was in her 30s, she was actually a podiatrist, which means a foot doctor. And she had no experience in fashion, let alone running a business. She was, however, looking to make a big change in her life. So one day she dropped everything and moved to Bali. She talks to our new host, Georgia Love, who is a lady startup herself. She's got a pajama label called George Elliott. And they talk about Desiree's unconventional journey into fashion.
So I ended up working with the Westfield Group and doing some styling and visual merchandising with them. And again, I still didn't feel fulfilled. I had taken a 5-day holiday to Bali with some girlfriends, the first time I'd never been, and I ended up meeting a lot of creative people. And I thought, oh, wow, this is really interesting. And I thought, I could live here.
This episode was produced by Mel Sauer, and the executive producer of No Filter is Elissa Ratliff. You can find more episodes of this podcast on Spotify. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Tell a friend, tell your mum, tell your sister, tell the person who makes your coffee in the morning. I'm Mia Friedman, and I'll see you on mamamia.com.au.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.